Chapter 1: The Offer. The fog was a sentient thing tonight, coiling around the rusted gates of Blackwood Sanatorium like a suffocating serpent. It tasted of brine and decay, a fitting welcome to this forgotten corner of the world. I pulled my threadbare coat tighter, the chill seeping into my bones despite the late summer humidity. Why I'd agreed to this morbid adventure, I couldn't entirely recall. Curiosity, maybe, or perhaps a touch of that reckless self-destructiveness that seemed to be a family trait. My name is Elias Thorne, and I'm what you might call an urban explorer, or more accurately, a trespasser with a penchant for the forgotten and the macabre. Derelict buildings, abandoned towns, forgotten cemeteries. These are the places that call to me, whispering stories of lives lived and lost. I document these places, take photographs, try to piece together the fragments of the past. It's a solitary existence, but one I find compelling. Blackwood was different. Even among the ruins I usually sought out, this place had a reputation, a local legend, a black stain on the already bleak canvas of New England history. The whispers painted a picture of madness, cruelty, and something else, something darker. The sanatorium had been built in the late 1800s, intended as a haven for the mentally afflicted. The euphemisms used in the old articles were almost as chilling as the details themselves. Nervous disorders, hysteria, melancholia. Conditions we now understand, but back then they were treated with methods that would make your stomach churn. Lobotomies, electroshock therapy, ice baths, confinement. The list went on. It operated for nearly a century, growing larger and more isolated as the years passed. Then, in 1972, it abruptly closed. The official explanation was financial difficulties and shifting attitudes towards mental health care. But the whispers said something else. They spoke of an outbreak, a contagion, not of the body but of the mind. They said that the madness within the walls of Blackwood had somehow spread. Whatever the truth, the building had been left to rot ever since. Locals avoided it, claiming it was cursed. The police patrolled the perimeter, warning off trespassers. But the stories were too tempting to ignore. I'd driven for hours, navigating winding back roads until I reached the edge of Blackwood's property. The gates, though rusted and overgrown with ivy, were still imposing. A faded sign, barely legible beneath layers of grime, read, "Blackwood Sanatorium, Hope and Healing." The irony was almost comical. I slipped through a gap in the fence, the metal groaning in protest. The fog clung to me like a shroud, muffling the sounds of the outside world. The only sound was the rustling of the wind through the overgrown trees and the rhythmic thump of my own heart. The main building loomed ahead, a Gothic monstrosity of dark stone and shattered windows. It was far larger than I had imagined, sprawling across the hillside like a wounded beast. The architecture was oppressive, designed to intimidate rather than comfort. Every window seemed to be a vacant eye, staring out into the darkness. I pulled out my camera, a battered Nikon D850 that had seen better days. It was my constant companion, my tool for capturing the essence of these forgotten places. I took a few shots of the exterior, trying to capture the building's oppressive atmosphere. The fog swirled around the stone, making it seem to shift and writhe. The main entrance was boarded up, but it didn't take long to find another way in. A ground floor window, its glass long gone, offered a gaping maw into the darkness. I hesitated for a moment, a shiver crawling down my spine. This was it, the point of no return. I climbed through the window, landing with a soft thud on the dusty floor. The air inside was thick and heavy, laden with the smell of mildew, decay, and something else. Something indefinable. A faint, metallic tang that made my nostrils twitch. The interior was even more unsettling than the exterior. The walls were stained with dampness, peeling paint hanging in ragged strips. The floor was littered with debris, broken furniture, shattered glass, scattered papers. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. I switched on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. The light revealed a long, shadowy hallway, lined with closed doors. Each door had a small, rectangular window, now mostly obscured by dust and grime. I could imagine patients staring out of those windows, their eyes filled with despair. I started down the hallway, my footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. I tried to focus on the details, on the architecture, on the textures. Anything to keep my mind from dwelling on the stories I had heard. The first few rooms were empty, stripped bare of any furniture or personal belongings. They were small and claustrophobic, barely large enough to contain a bed and a small table. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, patterns of flowers and birds that seemed strangely cheerful in this desolate place. Then I found the first sign. In one of the rooms, scrawled on the wall in what looked like dried blood, were the words, "They're watching." The blood chilled in my veins. This wasn't just an abandoned building. Something had happened here, something terrible. I took a photograph of the inscription, my hand shaking slightly. I tried to tell myself it was just graffiti, some prankster trying to scare off trespassers, but I didn't believe it. The writing felt authentic, filled with a raw, desperate fear. I continued down the hallway, my senses on high alert. The air seemed to grow colder, the silence more oppressive. I could feel a presence in the building, something watching me from the shadows. The next few rooms were similar to the first, empty, desolate, filled with the ghosts of forgotten patients. But then I found a room that was different. This room was filled with furniture, a bed, a table, a chair. But everything was broken, shattered, as if a violent struggle had taken place. The walls were covered in scratches, deep gouges that looked like claw marks. And in the center of the room, lying on the floor, was a doll. It was an old-fashioned doll with a porcelain face and a tattered dress. Its eyes were wide and staring, fixed on some unseen horror. One of its arms was missing, torn off at the shoulder. I picked up the doll, my fingers brushing against its cold, smooth face. A jolt of something ran through me. A flash of images like a broken film reel. A young girl screaming, being dragged away. A dark figure looming over her. I dropped the doll as if it had burned me. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. What had that been? A hallucination, a memory. I backed away from the room, my legs trembling. I wanted to leave, to get out of this place. but something held me back. A morbid curiosity, a need to know what had happened here. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control of myself. I told myself it was just the atmosphere, the stories, the power of suggestion. I was letting my imagination run wild. I forced myself to go back into the room, to examine it more closely. I wanted to find some rational explanation for what I had experienced. I noticed something I had missed before. Underneath the bed, hidden in the shadows, was a small, leather-bound book. I reached for the book, my hand shaking. What secrets did it hold? What horrors would it reveal? I pulled the book out from under the bed, brushing off the dust. The leather was cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. There was no title on the cover. I opened the book, my fingers trembling as I turned the first page. The handwriting was small and neat, but the words were chilling. They came for me tonight, the first entry read. They said I was sick, that I needed help, but I'm not sick, I'm just different. They don't understand, they never will. I turned the page, my heart pounding in my chest. They lock me in my room, they give me pills, they say they're for my own good, but they make me feel strange, like I'm not myself anymore. I turned another page. I see things in the shadows, things that aren't there. They watch me, they whisper to me, they tell me I'm going crazy. I turned another page. The doll, she's my only friend, she understands. She knows what they're doing to me. She tells me to resist, but I'm so tired, so weak. I turned another page. They took the doll away. They said it was making me worse, but it was the only thing that kept me sane. Now I'm lost. I turned another page. The handwriting was different now. Jagged, erratic, barely legible. They're inside my head. They're controlling me. I can't stop them. I can't resist. I turned another page. The last entry was just a single word, scrawled across the entire page in a desperate, frantic hand. Run. A cold hand gripped my heart. I slammed the book shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I had to get out of here, now. But as I turned to leave the room, I saw something in the hallway. A figure, standing in the shadows, watching me. It was tall and gaunt, with long skeletal limbs. Its face was hidden in darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me, burning into me. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, like a rabbit caught in the headlights of a car. The figure took a step forward, and then another. It was getting closer. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. My throat was constricted, my vocal cords paralyzed with fear. The figure was almost upon me now. I could see its eyes, glowing red in the darkness. They were filled with malice, with a hunger that chilled me to the core. It reached out a long skeletal hand. And then everything went black. Chapter 2: Descent into Madness. Consciousness returned in fragments, like shattered glass slowly reassembling. A throbbing headache was my first sensation, followed by the taste of dust and something acrid, metallic, lingering on my tongue. My limbs were leaden, unresponsive. I was lying on the cold, hard floor, the rough texture of the stone grating against my cheek. Panic clawed at my throat, the figure, the eyes, the feeling of utter, soul-crushing dread. It had all been too real. This wasn't just an abandoned building, it was a hunting ground. I forced myself to sit up, every muscle screaming in protest. The room swam back into focus, the broken furniture and scratched walls a grim reminder of what had transpired. The doll lay discarded a few feet away, its porcelain face mocking my terror. The leather-bound book. Where was the book? I scrambled around on the floor, my fingers fumbling in the dust. Relief washed over me as I found it tucked beneath my body, clutched tightly in my hand. The last entry, that single, desperate word, run, seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. I had to get out, now. But as I turned towards the doorway, a chilling realization dawned. The hallway was no longer silent. A soft, rhythmic shuffling sound echoed from the darkness, a sound that sent ice shards through my veins. It was the sound of something, moving, something slow, deliberate, and inexorably approaching. I froze, every nerve on high alert. The shuffling grew louder, closer. I could feel the presence again, that oppressive weight of malevolence pressing down on me. I had to hide. My eyes darted around the room, searching for any semblance of cover. The broken furniture offered little protection. The bed, though wrecked, was the best option. I crawled beneath it, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The dust choked me, filling my nostrils and coating my tongue. I pressed myself against the cold stone floor, trying to make myself as small as possible. The shuffling stopped just outside the doorway. A long, agonizing silence stretched out, broken only by the frantic beat of my own heart. I held my breath, afraid to even blink. Then a new sound, a soft, wet rasping like something dragging itself across the floor. It was getting closer. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the image of what might be on the other side of that doorway. The figure, those eyes, the feeling of utter helplessness. The rasping stopped directly in front of the bed. I could feel its presence, inches away. A palpable wave of cold, stale air washed over me. Another silence, longer this time, torturous. Then a low, guttural whisper, so faint it was almost imperceptible. "We know you're there." The words were like a viper's strike, injecting pure terror into my veins. It knew I was hiding. I remained motionless, my body rigid with fear. I refused to acknowledge the voice, to give it any satisfaction. The whispering continued, growing louder, more insistent. Come out and play." The words were laced with a sickening sweetness, a perversion of innocence that made my stomach churn. I stayed silent, refusing to respond. The whispering intensified, becoming a chorus of voices. Whispers from the walls, from the floor, from the darkness itself. Join us, become one of us." The voices were trying to break me, to erode my will. They wanted me to surrender, to give in to the madness. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms. I had to resist. I had to stay strong. The voices grew louder still, a cacophony of whispers that threatened to overwhelm me. They were inside my head now, invading my thoughts, feeding on my fears. I squeezed my eyes tighter, focusing on a single image. My home, my sanctuary, the one place where I felt safe. I imagined the familiar sights, the smells, the sounds. I clung to that image, using it as a shield against the encroaching darkness. The voices continued to swirl around me, but they were losing their power. My mental fortress was holding. Then a new sensation, a tingling, itching feeling on my skin, like tiny insects crawling all over me. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my image of home, but the itching grew more intense, more unbearable. I couldn't resist any longer. I scratched at my arm, my nails digging into my flesh. And then I saw it. A small black insect crawling on my skin. A beetle with glistening eyes and sharp mandibles. I brushed it away, but more appeared, crawling out of the shadows, from under the bed, from the walls themselves. They were swarming me, covering me in a writhing mass of chitin and legs. I screamed, my voice cracking with terror. I thrashed beneath the bed, trying to shake them off. But it was no use. They were everywhere, crawling into my hair, into my ears, into my mouth. I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating. The image of home faded, replaced by a swirling vortex of darkness. The voices returned, stronger than ever. Welcome, welcome to the Blackwood family. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the darkness. The beetles consumed me, devouring my sanity, my will, my very soul. And then silence. A long, peaceful silence. I opened my eyes. I was standing in the hallway. The room behind me was empty, the bed undisturbed. The doll lay on the floor, its porcelain face serene. The leather-bound book was gone. I was alone. But I was. I could feel the presence still there, watching me, guiding me. I knew what I had to do. I started down the hallway, my footsteps light and purposeful. I knew where I was going. I was going to join them. I was going to become one of them. I was going to become a part of Blackwood. The fog swirled outside, embracing the sanatorium, concealing its secrets. And within its walls, another soul was lost. Another mind was consumed. Another voice was added to the chorus. The darkness had won. Chapter 3. The whispers begin. The hallway stretched before me, an endless corridor of peeling paint and shadowed doorways. But now it didn't feel menacing. It felt welcoming, like a familiar embrace. The terror that had gripped me moments ago was gone, replaced by a strange sense of calm. A detachment from the fear, from the urgency of escape. It was as if a switch had been flipped, severing the connection between my mind and the primal instinct for self-preservation. I walked with a newfound purpose, my footsteps echoing softly on the dusty floor. The whispers were still there, a constant murmur in the back of my mind, but they no longer felt threatening. They were guiding, nudging me forward. I passed room after room, each a silent testament to the suffering that had taken place within these walls. I saw glimpses of broken furniture, faded wallpaper, and the lingering traces of despair. But none of it affected me. It was as if I were watching a movie, a detached observer with no personal stake in the drama. The hallway seemed to lengthen, to stretch on indefinitely, but I wasn't concerned. I knew where I was going. The whispers were leading me. Finally, I reached the end of the hallway. A heavy oak door blocked my path. It was different from the other doors, more ornate, more imposing. A tarnished brass plate was affixed to its surface, engraved with a single word: Director. The director's office, I knew it. The whispers had told me. I reached for the handle, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. A jolt of recognition passed through me. It was as if I had held this handle before, countless times. I turned the handle, the mechanism groaning in protest. The door swung inward, revealing a large, dimly lit room. The director's office was unlike any other room I had seen in the sanatorium. It was filled with antique furniture, leather-bound books, and ornate decorations. A large mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, its surface cluttered with papers, files, and various curiosities. A fire crackled merrily in a stone fireplace, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The air was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, damp hallways. And sitting behind the desk, in a high-backed leather chair, was the figure. The same figure that had confronted me in the hallway. Tall, gaunt, with long, skeletal limbs. Its face still hidden in darkness, but its eyes burning with a malevolent intensity. But now the fear was gone. I wasn't afraid of the figure anymore. I felt drawn to it, compelled to obey. The figure gestured towards a chair in front of the desk. "Please," it said, its voice a low, guttural rasp. "Have a seat." I obeyed without question, my legs moving as if on autopilot. I sat down in the chair, my eyes fixed on the figure. "Welcome, Elias," the figure said. "I've been expecting you." How did it know my name? The question flickered through my mind, but it didn't seem to matter. Nothing mattered anymore, except pleasing the figure. "You have a gift, Elias," the figure continued. "A sensitivity to the other side, a capacity for understanding." I didn't understand what it was talking about, but I nodded anyway, eager to please. "You have been chosen, Elias," the figure said. "Chosen to become a part of something greater." "Chosen for what?" "Blackwood is more than just a sanatorium, Elias," the figure said. "It is a nexus, a gateway, a place where the veil between worlds is thin." "Worlds? What worlds?" "There are things beyond your comprehension, Elias," the figure said. "Things that exist in the shadows, just beyond the reach of your senses. Things that hunger, things that wait." I felt a shiver run down my spine, despite the warmth of the room. "Blackwood allows us to connect with those things, Elias," the figure said, "to draw power from them, to become more." "More than what?" "More than human." "We are the guardians, Elias," the figure said. "The gatekeepers. We protect the world from the horrors that lie beyond." Guardians, protectors. But what about the suffering, the madness, the darkness within these walls? "Sacrifices must be made, Elias," the figure said, as if reading my mind. "For the greater good." "Sacrifices? What sacrifices?" You will learn, Elias, the figure said. In time, you will understand. The figure leaned forward, its face emerging from the shadows. Its skin was pale and stretched taut over its bones. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural red light. Are you ready, Elias? The figure asked. Are you ready to embrace your destiny? I hesitated for a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing my mind. But then the whispers returned, urging me forward. Yes, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm ready. The figure smiled, a slow, cruel smile that revealed rows of sharp, pointed teeth. Excellent, it said. Then let us begin. The figure stood up from behind the desk and walked towards me. It reached out a long, skeletal hand and placed it on my forehead. A surge of energy coursed through me, burning through my veins. I felt my mind expanding, my senses heightened. I could see things I had never seen before, hear things I had never heard before. I could see the darkness lurking in the shadows, the entities that hungered beyond the veil. I could hear their whispers, their promises of power and knowledge. The figure's hand remained on my forehead, channeling the energy, guiding me towards the darkness. I felt myself changing, transforming. My body felt lighter, more ethereal. My mind felt sharper, more focused. I was becoming something else. Something more. The figure removed its hand, its eyes glowing with satisfaction. You are one of us now, Elias, it said. Welcome to the Blackwood family. I looked at my hands, my fingers long and slender, my skin pale and luminous. I was no longer Elias Thorne. I was something new. Something Blackwood. The figure gestured towards a door behind the desk. Come, it said. There is much to learn. I followed the figure through the door, leaving behind the world I once knew. I was entering a new world now, a world of darkness, of power, of endless possibilities. A world where the whispers never stopped. A world where the Blackwood family reigned supreme. Chapter 4: Embracing the Change. The door behind the director's desk led to a narrow, winding staircase that spiraled downwards, plunging into the depths of the sanatorium. The air grew colder, heavier, with each step I took. The scent of mildew and decay intensified, mingling with a strange, metallic odor that tickled my nostrils. The whispers grew louder too, a chorus of voices urging me onward, deeper into the darkness. They spoke of secrets and power, of forbidden knowledge and unimaginable horrors. They were intoxicating, seductive, impossible to resist. The director led the way, his long, skeletal frame casting elongated shadows on the damp stone walls. He moved with a fluid grace that seemed unnatural, almost spectral. I tried to focus on his movements, to emulate his composure, but my mind was still reeling from the transformation. I was no longer Elias Thorne, but I wasn't entirely sure what I was. The old memories, the old emotions, felt distant and faded, like echoes from a forgotten dream. The staircase ended at a heavy, iron door, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to writhe and shift as I looked at them. The director paused, placing his hand on the door. Beyond this door lies the heart of Blackwood, Elias, he said, his voice a low rasp. The source of our power. Are you ready to see it? I nodded, my throat constricted. I had no idea what awaited me, but I felt a strange sense of anticipation, a morbid curiosity that overrode any lingering fear. The director pushed the door open, revealing a vast, cavernous chamber. The air inside was thick and suffocating, laden with a palpable sense of dread. The only light came from a series of flickering torches that lined the walls, casting grotesque shadows on the surrounding surfaces. The chamber was filled with bizarre machinery, cobbled together from rusted metal and salvaged parts. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting the machines to a central structure that dominated the center of the room. The structure was a massive, pulsating orb, suspended in midair by a network of chains and pulleys. It glowed with an eerie green light, its surface rippling with energy. The whispers emanated from the orb, growing louder, more insistent. "This, Elias, is the Nexus," the director said, his voice filled with awe. "The source of Blackwood's power, the gateway to everything." I stared at the orb, mesmerized by its hypnotic glow. I could feel its energy, a raw, untamed force that threatened to overwhelm me. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. The director led me closer to the Nexus, his hand resting on my shoulder. "The Nexus feeds on emotions, Elias," he said. "On fear, despair, and suffering. It amplifies those emotions, channeling them into something more." I looked around the chamber, noticing for the first time the figures chained to the walls. They were human, or at least they had been. Their bodies were emaciated, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed. They stared blankly ahead, their minds lost in a fog of madness and despair. "These are the sacrifices, Elias," the director said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They provide the Nexus with the energy it needs to sustain us, to protect us." Protect us from what? The question formed in my mind, but I didn't voice it. I knew the answer already. The director led me to a small, metal platform in front of the Nexus. He gestured for me to step onto it. "This is where you will begin your training, Elias," he said. "You will learn to harness the power of the Nexus, to control the darkness within you." I stepped onto the platform, my heart pounding in my chest. The energy emanating from the Nexus was almost unbearable now, a searing heat that threatened to burn me alive. The director raised his hands, chanting in a low, guttural tongue. The orb pulsed faster, its green light intensifying. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling my mind with images of horror and despair. I felt myself losing control, my mind fragmenting, my sanity slipping away. The emotions of the sacrifices washed over me, their fear, their pain, their utter hopelessness. I wanted to scream, to beg for it to stop, but I couldn't. I was trapped, bound to the platform by an unseen force. The director continued chanting, his voice rising in pitch. The Nexus pulsed faster and faster, its energy reaching a fever pitch. And then everything exploded. A blinding flash of green light engulfed me, searing my eyes. A wave of energy crashed over me, tearing through my body, shattering my mind. I felt myself being ripped apart, piece by piece. My memories, my emotions, my very identity were all being erased, replaced by something else. Something darker. Something Blackwood. The light faded, leaving me gasping for breath. I looked at my hands, my fingers trembling. My skin was still pale, still luminous, but something was different. I could feel the darkness within me, a cold, empty void that craved something. Something more. The director stopped chanting, lowering his hands. He smiled, a slow, cruel smile that sent shivers down my spine. "You have passed the first test, Elias," he said. "You are now ready to begin your true training." He stepped off the platform, gesturing for me to follow. "Come," he said. "There is much to learn." I followed him without question, my mind numb, my will subservient. I was a puppet now, controlled by the forces of Blackwood. We left the chamber, the screams of the sacrifices fading behind us. The iron door slammed shut, sealing them in their torment. I didn't care, I felt nothing, except a growing hunger. A hunger for more. The whispers grew louder, guiding me onward, deeper into the darkness. I was home now. I was Blackwood. Chapter 5: Blackwood's Apprentice. The corridors of Blackwood had become my new reality. We moved with a purpose, the director leading the way through a maze of forgotten rooms, echoing halls, and hidden passages. The sanatorium was a living entity, a labyrinthine organism, and I now a part of its circulatory system. Our first stop was the archives, a vast, subterranean library where the accumulated knowledge and the documented horrors of Blackwood were stored. Rows upon rows of towering bookshelves lined the cavernous space, filled with ancient tomes, leather-bound journals, and cryptic scrolls. The air was thick with the smell of dust, decay, and something else, something akin to ozone, crackling with unseen energy. "Here you will learn the history of Blackwood," the director said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "The methods, the purpose." He gestured towards a particular shelf, filled with a collection of journals bound in black leather. "These are the records of our predecessors, the secrets they uncovered, the sacrifices they made." I approached the shelf, my fingers tracing the spines of the journals. The titles were cryptic, almost indecipherable, but the whispers in my mind understood them. They were filled with promises of power, of transcendence, and of a way to control the forces that dwelled beyond the veil. The director selected a journal and handed it to me. Its pages were filled with meticulous handwriting, detailing the experiments, the rituals, and the methods used to harness the energy of the Nexus. He spoke of the patients who had become conduits, of the horrors that had been unleashed, of the sacrifices that were necessary to maintain control. I read the journal, my mind absorbing the information like a sponge. The details were disturbing, even to my transformed sensibilities, but they were also compelling. I understood the logic, the necessity of it all, the need to protect humanity from the horrors that lurked beyond the veil. "You will learn to identify the vulnerabilities," the director said, watching me closely. "The points of entry, the places where the veil is thin." He showed me diagrams of the human psyche, intricate maps of the mind and soul, highlighting the areas that could be exploited. He explained the various methods of manipulating the emotions, of inducing fear, despair, and madness, thereby weakening the barriers between worlds. You will learn to become a shepherd, he said, his voice taking on a note of pride, guiding the lost souls, preparing them for their purpose. My training continued for weeks, months, perhaps even years. Time had lost all meaning within the walls of Blackwood. I studied the journals, learned the rituals, and practiced the techniques. I learned to identify the signs of the others, the subtle shifts in reality, the whispers in the dark, the feeling of dread that permeated the sanatorium. I spent hours in the chamber of the Nexus, learning to control the energy that emanated from the pulsating orb. I learned to channel that energy, to direct it, to use it to amplify emotions, to break down the barriers between worlds. I felt the darkness within me grow, expanding like a malignant tumor. And then the director began my practical training. He took me to the wards, the areas where the patients, the sacrifices were kept. I watched as he performed his rituals, as he manipulated their emotions, as he prepared them for their final purpose. I observed, I learned, and then I began to assist. At first, I was hesitant, repulsed by the suffering of the patients, but the director reassured me. He explained that their suffering was necessary, that it was all for a greater good. They are vessels, Elias, he said. They are not individuals, they are simply tools. We must use them or we will all be destroyed. Slowly I began to accept it, to understand the logic, the necessity. The whispers in my mind helped, urging me forward, whispering of the power that awaited me. I learned to administer the injections, to perform the procedures, to manipulate the minds of the patients. I learned to see them not as human beings, but as resources. I became good at it, too good. I had a particular knack for identifying vulnerabilities, for exploiting the weaknesses in their minds. I could induce fear, despair, and madness with ease. I could break them completely, and prepare them for their final purpose. The director was pleased with my progress. He praised my dedication, my skill, my commitment. You are a natural, Elias, he said. You have a true gift. And then the director gave me my first assignment, my first solo assignment. He led me to a specific ward, a room filled with patients who had shown resistance, who had fought against the darkness. Their faces were gaunt and haunted, their eyes filled with a desperate fear. These patients require a special touch, the director said. They need to be broken completely. This is your task, Elias. He handed me a syringe filled with a dark, viscous fluid. This will help you, he said. It will facilitate the process. He left me alone with the patients. I looked at them, at their terrified faces, at their pleading eyes. I felt a flicker of something, a faint echo of the empathy I had once known. But it was quickly extinguished. I was a shepherd now, a guardian, and my task was to guide these lost souls towards their destiny. I approached the first patient, a young woman with long, dark hair. She cowered in the corner, her eyes wide with terror. I raised the syringe, the dark fluid shimmering in the dim light. And then I injected it. The woman screamed, a piercing sound that echoed through the ward. Her body convulsed, her eyes rolled back in her head. I watched her detached, as the darkness consumed her. And as I watched, I felt a surge of power, a thrill of control, a deep, satisfying sense of completion. I had done it. I had broken her. I had embraced my destiny. I had become Blackwood. The whispers in my mind grew louder, praising my performance, promising me even greater rewards. And as I continued my work, moving from patient to patient, administering the injections, breaking their minds, I felt a sense of belonging. I was no longer alone. I was part of something eternal. I was part of the Blackwood family. And in the depths of my transformed heart, I knew that there was no turning back. Chapter 6: Learning the Lore. The transformation within Blackwood was an insidious, creeping corruption, less a sudden event and more a slow erosion of self. The initial change, the surge of energy from the Nexus, was merely the catalyst. The true horror lay in the subtle alterations that followed, the gradual warping of perspective, the erosion of empathy, the embracing of the darkness as a necessary evil. After that night in the ward, after the breaking of those resistant patients, I became a creature of routine, a cog in the well-oiled machine of Blackwood. Each day followed a similar pattern: study, ritual, manipulation, sacrifice. The details varied, the faces of the patients changed, but the underlying purpose remained constant: to fuel the Nexus, to strengthen the barriers against the entities beyond, to protect humanity, even if humanity didn't understand or even want our protection. The director watched my progress with a keen eye, offering guidance, encouragement, and the occasional correction. He was a strict mentor, demanding unwavering obedience and absolute dedication to the cause. His methods were often harsh, even brutal, but I understood that it was all for my own good. He was shaping me, molding me into the instrument that Blackwood needed. One day, he summoned me to his office. The familiar scent of burning wood and old leather filled the air, a comforting aroma that spoke of stability and order in this chaotic realm. "Elias," he said, his voice a low rasp, "you have progressed remarkably well. Your contributions to Blackwood have been invaluable." I bowed my head, accepting his praise with a sense of detached pride. "However," he continued, his eyes narrowing, "there is still much you need to learn. You have mastered the techniques of manipulation, but you have yet to understand the true nature of the entities we face." He gestured towards a bookshelf filled with ancient tomes. "These books contain the secrets of the others, their history, their motivations, their weaknesses. You must study them, Elias. You must understand them." For weeks, I immersed myself in the forbidden lore of Blackwood. I read accounts of ancient rituals, of cosmic horrors, of beings that existed beyond the boundaries of human comprehension. The stories were terrifying, unsettling, but they also sparked a strange sense of fascination. I learned of the Old Ones, ancient entities that had existed long before humanity, beings of immense power and unimaginable cruelty. They dwelled in the spaces between worlds, waiting for an opportunity to break through the veil and claim our reality for their own. I learned of the great dreamer, a slumbering god whose nightmares manifested in the waking world, twisting reality and driving men mad. His influence was subtle, insidious, but it could corrupt entire civilizations. I learned of the crawling chaos, a shapeless entity that delighted in sowing discord and destruction. It could assume any form, manipulate any mind, and bring about the downfall of entire societies. The more I learned, the more I understood the necessity of Blackwood's mission. These entities were real, they were powerful, and they were determined to destroy everything we held dear. Blackwood was the only thing standing between humanity and utter annihilation. But as my knowledge of the entities grew, so too did my understanding of the sacrifices required to combat them. The patients were not simply resources, as the director had claimed. They were conduits, vessels, whose suffering was used to fuel the nexus and strengthen the barriers against the encroaching darkness. Their pain was a necessary evil, a price that had to be paid to protect the rest of humanity. The director had been right all along. One evening, as I was studying a particularly disturbing text on the anatomy of the human soul, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the hallway outside my room. I paused, listening intently. The sound was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was definitely there. A persistent, rhythmic scratching, like fingernails scraping against stone. Curiosity piqued. I opened my door and peered into the hallway. The shadows were long and distorted, cast by the flickering torches that lined the walls. At first I saw nothing, but then I noticed a small figure huddled in the corner, its face hidden in darkness. It was one of the patients, a young girl no older than 10, with long, tangled hair and wide, haunted eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. The girl flinched, shrinking back into the shadows. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You have to help me." "Help you?" I asked, my brow furrowing. "What do you need help with?" "They're going to take me," she said, her voice trembling. "They're going to take me to the chamber." The chamber. The chamber of the Nexus. The place where the sacrifices were prepared for their final purpose. A flicker of something stirred within me, a faint echo of the empathy I had tried so hard to suppress. "Who's going to take you?" I asked, my voice softening slightly. "The doctors," she said. "They come at night, they strap you down, they do things." I knew what she was talking about. I had seen it myself. The rituals, the injections, the manipulation of the mind. "You have to hide me," she pleaded, her eyes filled with tears. "Please, I don't want to die." I hesitated for a moment, torn between my loyalty to Blackwood and the faint stirring of empathy within me. The whispers in my mind urged me to ignore her, to send her back to her ward, to let her meet her destiny. But something held me back. "Come with me," I said, my voice barely audible. I led the girl into my room, closing the door behind us. The room was small and sparsely furnished, but it offered a temporary refuge from the horrors of Blackwood. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice gentle. "Lily," she said, her voice trembling. "My name is Lily." I looked at her frail body, her haunted eyes, and I knew that I couldn't let her be sacrificed. I couldn't let her become another conduit for the darkness. I had made a choice. I had chosen Lily over Blackwood. And in that moment, the transformation began to unravel. The darkness within me began to recede, replaced by a faint glimmer of hope. But I knew that my decision had consequences. I had become an enemy of Blackwood, and enemies of Blackwood did not survive. Chapter 7, The Choice, Lily. Hiding Lily was a precarious endeavor, a constant dance on the edge of discovery. Blackwood, even in its decaying state, was a meticulously organized institution. Every detail meticulously tracked, every patient accounted for. To spirit a child away from the wards, even temporarily, was an act of rebellion, a defiance of the order that held the sanatorium together. I secreted her in a small, disused storage room adjacent to my own quarters. It was cramped and dusty, filled with forgotten medical equipment and moth-eaten linens, but it offered a measure of privacy. I scavenged what I could to make it more comfortable. A threadbare blanket, a cracked wash basin, a flickering candle for light. Lily was understandably terrified, clinging to me with a desperate grip. She recounted her experiences in the wards, the torturous treatments, the chilling whispers, the feeling of being watched, of being used. Her words were like a corrosive acid, burning away the layers of justification I had built up over the past months. "They say I'm special," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They say I have a strong connection, that I can hear them better than the others. Hear them, the entities beyond the veil." A chilling realization dawned. Lily wasn't just a random patient. She was a powerful conduit, a key to unlocking the secrets of the Nexus. That's why they were so eager to sacrifice her. I felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce determination to keep her safe. I couldn't allow her to become a tool for Blackwood's dark purposes. But protecting her meant defying the director, defying the whispers in my mind, defying the very foundations of the sanatorium. It was a dangerous game, and I knew that I was playing with fire. I spent my days continuing my duties, attending the rituals, assisting the doctors with the treatments. My outward demeanor remained unchanged, my actions seemingly compliant, but internally a battle raged. The darkness, the whispers, the ingrained logic of Blackwood still held a strong grip. It was a constant struggle to maintain the facade, to keep my true intentions hidden. I used my position to gather information. I eavesdropped on conversations, examined the records, and learned as much as I could about the director's plans. I discovered that Lily's abilities were indeed exceptional, far beyond what I had imagined. She could not only hear the whispers, but she could also see them. She described them to me, fleeting shadows in the periphery, monstrous forms that shifted and writhed, whispers that coalesced into faces that leered from the darkness. The entities were drawn to her, captivated by her potent connection to the Nexus. They craved her, wanted to possess her, to use her to break through the veil. The director, I realized, intended to use Lily as a weapon, a living key to unlock the full potential of the Nexus. He planned to amplify her abilities, to open the gateway wide, and unleash the horrors beyond upon the world. The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I had to stop him. I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. But who could I trust? Within the walls of Blackwood, trust was a dangerous commodity, easily betrayed. I had to find someone who could understand, someone who could help me, someone who was also a prisoner of Blackwood. That night I made my way to the infirmary, a large, sterile room filled with beds and medical equipment. I had noticed a new patient there, a woman who had arrived a few days earlier. She was different from the other patients, older, more lucid. She had a haunted look in her eyes, but also a spark of defiance. I had seen her reading, poring over ancient texts, just as I had done. She seemed to possess a knowledge of the sanatorium, a familiarity with its secrets that went beyond the mundane. I approached her bed, my heart pounding in my chest. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The woman looked up, her eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of recognition, of understanding. "Yes," she asked, her voice surprisingly strong. "My name is Elias," I said. I think you know what's happening here." She studied me for a moment, her gaze piercing and assessing. "Indeed I do," she said. "Blackwood is a place of shadows and secrets." "I need your help," I said, my voice urgent. "There's a girl, Lily. They're going to use her. They're going to destroy everything." The woman's eyes widened with alarm. "Lily, that child, she's the key." "I know," I said, "and I want to save her, but I can't do it alone. They'll find her, they'll find me." The woman sat up in her bed, her gaze fixed on me. "What do you propose?" "We have to get out," I said. "We have to escape Blackwood." "Escape is impossible," she said, shaking her head. "The sanatorium is a prison of the mind as well as of the body. There is no escape." "There has to be a way," I insisted. "We have to find a way." The woman sighed, her shoulders slumping. "My name is Clara," she said. "I used to be a historian. I studied the occult. I know more about the forces that dwell within this place than I care to remember." "Then you can help us," I said, my voice filled with hope. Clara looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "It won't be easy, Elias. The director will not let us leave. He has too much invested in this place. He will stop at nothing to protect his power." "We have to try," I said, "for Lily, for ourselves, for the world." Clara nodded, her gaze hardening with determination. "Very well," she said. "I will help you. But you must understand, Elias, this is a suicide mission. We are walking into the heart of darkness." "I know," I said, "but I'm ready to risk it." And so our alliance was forged. We met secretly, exchanging information, formulating a plan. We knew that our chances were slim, that we were up against a powerful and ruthless enemy. But we also knew that we had no choice. We had to fight. We had to escape. We had to save Lily. And as we planned, the whispers in my mind grew stronger, more insistent, warning me of the danger, urging me to betray Clara, to return to the fold. But I ignored them. I had made my choice. I was no longer Blackwood. I was Elias Thorne, and I was fighting for my life. Chapter 8: Escape from Within. Clara proved to be an invaluable ally. Her knowledge of Blackwood's history and architecture was encyclopedic. She knew the hidden passages, the forgotten tunnels, the secret chambers that lay beneath the sanatorium. She had spent years studying the blueprints, piecing together the puzzle of the building's intricate design. She explained that Blackwood had been built on an ancient site, a place of power that had been used for centuries by various cults and secret societies. The sanatorium had been deliberately constructed over this nexus to harness the energy and exploit the vulnerabilities of the location. Clara knew of a hidden escape route, a tunnel that led from the basement to the outside world. It had been used by the original architects of Blackwood, a secret passage that allowed them to access the ancient site without drawing attention. The tunnel was dangerous, she warned. It was unstable, prone to collapse, and it was likely guarded by something. The entities that dwelled within Blackwood were territorial, and they would not take kindly to intruders. But it was our only chance. The plan was simple but fraught with peril. We would sneak out of our rooms under the cover of darkness, rendezvous in the infirmary, and make our way to the basement. We would then navigate the tunnels, avoiding the guards, the traps, and the entities that lurked within. Lily was our greatest vulnerability. She was too young, too innocent, too susceptible to the influence of the darkness. We had to protect her at all costs. On the night of our escape, a storm raged outside, a fitting backdrop for the events that were about to unfold. The wind howled through the corridors of Blackwood, rattling the windows and shaking the walls. The rain lashed against the glass, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. I slipped out of my room, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallways were deserted, the shadows long and menacing. The whispers were louder than ever, urging me to turn back, to abandon the plan. I ignored them, focusing on the image of Lily, on the hope of freedom. I made my way to the storage room, my footsteps light and silent. I opened the door and found Lily huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with fear. "It's time," I whispered, my voice gentle. Lily nodded, taking my hand. Her fingers were cold and clammy. Together, we crept through the corridors, navigating the maze of shadows and echoing halls. We reached the infirmary without incident, finding Clara waiting for us, her face pale but determined. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "As ready as we'll ever be," I said, my hand tightening around Lily's. Clara led the way, her knowledge of the building proving invaluable. She guided us through hidden passages, past sleeping guards, and around deadly traps. We reached the basement, a dark, damp chamber filled with the stench of mildew and decay. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread. Clara pointed towards a section of the wall, concealed behind a stack of old crates. "The tunnel entrance is behind there," she said. "But be warned, Elias, it is not safe." I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. I moved the crates, revealing a narrow opening in the wall. The tunnel beyond was dark, cramped, and filled with the sound of dripping water. "Lily first," I said, lifting her into the opening. Clara followed, squeezing through the narrow passage. I took a deep breath and stepped into the tunnel, the darkness closing in around me. The whispers intensified, a chorus of voices that threatened to overwhelm me. They taunted me with visions of failure, of capture, of unimaginable torment. They reminded me of the power of Blackwood, of the futility of resistance. I forced myself to ignore them, focusing on Lily's safety, on the hope of escape. The tunnel was even more treacherous than Clara had described. The walls were damp and crumbling, the floor uneven and strewn with debris. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. We moved slowly, cautiously, our hands outstretched to guide us through the darkness. The only light came from a small flashlight that Clara carried, its beam cutting through the gloom. After what seemed like an eternity, we reached a section of the tunnel that was particularly unstable. The walls were cracked and bulging, the ceiling threatening to collapse. "We need to be careful here," Clara warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "This area is prone to cave-ins." As if on cue, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. A low rumble echoed through the tunnel, growing louder with each passing second. "Run!" Clara shouted, grabbing Lily's hand and pulling her forward. We sprinted through the tunnel, our hearts pounding in our chests. The rumbling intensified, the walls shaking violently. Suddenly, the ceiling collapsed, sending a shower of dirt and debris crashing down around us. Clara and Lily stumbled, falling to the ground. I turned back, pulling them to their feet. "We have to keep moving," I shouted. We continued running, dodging falling debris, our lungs burning with exertion. The tunnel seemed to be collapsing around us, the darkness closing in. Then a new sound, a guttural growl echoing from the depths of the tunnel, a sound that sent ice shards through my veins. "What was that?" Lily whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "We're not alone," Clara said, her voice grim. "Something's down here with us." The growling grew louder, closer. We could hear the sound of something moving through the tunnel, something large and powerful. "We have to hide," I said, scanning the tunnel for any semblance of cover. We spotted a small alcove in the wall, barely large enough to conceal us. We squeezed inside, pressing ourselves against the cold stone. The growling grew closer still, the tunnel vibrating with the force of whatever was approaching. Then it appeared. A monstrous creature, its form barely discernible in the dim light. It was tall and gaunt, with long, skeletal limbs and a head that was too large for its body. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, and its mouth was filled with rows of sharp, pointed teeth. It was one of the entities, a guardian of the tunnel. It sniffed the air, its head twitching from side to side. It could smell us, I knew it. It moved closer to the alcove, its eyes fixed on our hiding place. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Lily whimpered beside me, her body trembling. The creature reached out a long, skeletal hand, its fingers twitching and clawing at the air. It was about to discover us. Then Clara stepped forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "Get away from them," she shouted, her voice echoing through the tunnel. The creature turned towards her, its eyes narrowing. Clara held out her hands, chanting in a low, guttural tongue. The air around her shimmered with energy. The creature snarled, lunging towards her. Clara unleashed a blast of energy, striking the creature in the chest. It staggered backward, its eyes wide with surprise. "Run, Elias," Clara shouted. "Get Lily out of here, I'll hold it off." I hesitated for a moment, torn between my desire to help Clara and my responsibility to protect Lily. But I knew that Clara was right. I had to get Lily to safety. I grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her forward, running as fast as I could through the tunnel. I could hear Clara fighting behind us, her chants mixing with the creature's roars. I didn't dare look back. I had to keep moving. I had to get Lily out of here. I had to escape Blackwood. Chapter 9, Trapped and Hunted. We ran, stumbling through the darkness, the sound of Clara's desperate battle echoing behind us. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, a claustrophobic prison that threatened to swallow us whole. The air grew thin, making each breath a labored effort. Lily, despite her fear, held my hand tightly, her small fingers a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. The creature's roars faded, replaced by the sounds of struggle, of something heavy being thrown against the walls. Then silence, a chilling, pregnant silence that filled me with dread. Had she sacrificed herself to save us? I pushed the thought away, forcing myself to focus on our immediate survival. We had to keep moving, had to reach the end of the tunnel, had to escape Blackwood. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. Hope surged through me, pushing me forward. We reached the end of the tunnel and stumbled out into a small, enclosed courtyard. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky of bruised purple and a lingering scent of rain. The air was fresh, clean, a welcome contrast to the stale, suffocating air of the tunnels. But our relief was short-lived. The courtyard was surrounded by tall, imposing walls, topped with broken shards of glass. There was a single gate, its heavy iron bars locked tight. We were trapped. I tried the gate, rattling the bars, shouting for help, but there was no response. The only sound was the wind whispering through the trees. "We're trapped," Lily said, her voice trembling. "They've caught us." "Not yet," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "There has to be another way out." I scanned the walls, searching for any sign of a weak point. I noticed a small, rusted pipe that ran up one of the walls, disappearing over the top. "Come on," I said, grabbing Lily's hand. "We're climbing." It was a desperate gamble, but we had no other choice. I boosted Lily up, helping her grab onto the pipe. She struggled for a moment, her small frame barely strong enough to support her weight. "I can't," she said, her voice filled with fear. "You can," I said, my voice firm. "You have to. Think about Clara, think about escaping, think about being free." Lily took a deep breath, her eyes filling with determination. She pulled herself up, her small hands gripping the pipe tightly. I followed, my larger frame making the climb more difficult. The pipe was slippery with rain, and I had to strain every muscle to maintain my grip. We slowly, laboriously, ascended the wall. The broken glass at the top seemed to loom closer, a deadly obstacle that threatened to tear us apart. As we reached the top, I heard a sound behind us. A soft, shuffling sound, the sound of something moving slowly and deliberately. I looked down and saw it. The creature. It had somehow found its way out of the tunnel, and it was standing at the base of the wall, its red eyes burning with hatred. It started to climb, its long, skeletal limbs moving with surprising speed. We were trapped. There was nowhere to go. We were going to die. I looked at Lily, her face pale and drawn. I knew that I had failed her. I had failed Clara. I had failed myself. But I refused to give up. Not yet. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the leather-bound book, the journal I had found in the sanatorium. I had carried it with me, a reminder of the horrors of Blackwood, a symbol of my transformation. I opened the book and turned to the last entry, the single, desperate word that had haunted my dreams. Run. I looked at Lily, and I knew what I had to do. Run, I said, my voice hoarse. You have to run, go now. I shoved Lily forward, pushing her over the wall and onto the other side. She hesitated for a moment, looking back at me with tears in her eyes. Go, I shouted. I'll be right behind you. Lily scrambled over the wall, disappearing from sight. I turned to face the creature, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that I was no match for it, that my fate was sealed. But I wasn't going to go down without a fight. I raised the book, the journal I held so dear, ready to face my end. The creature reached the top of the wall and lunged towards me, its mouth open, its teeth bared. And then everything went black. Chapter 10, Fading Light Final Stand. Darkness, absolute and complete. It was a familiar embrace now, a constant companion that had been growing stronger with each passing day. But within that darkness, a flicker remained, a spark of defiance, a stubborn refusal to surrender completely. It was the echo of Elias Thorne, the man I once was, clinging to life in the face of oblivion. I felt nothing. No pain, no fear, no hope. Just a detached awareness of my own impending dissolution. The creature had overwhelmed me, its power too great, its hunger too insatiable. I was being consumed, devoured, my mind and soul slowly erased. But even as I faded, I clung to one thing, the memory of Lily. Her innocent face, her haunted eyes, her unwavering hope. She was the reason I had risked everything, the reason I had defied Blackwood. I couldn't let her down. I had to give her a chance to escape, to live a life free from the horrors of the sanatorium. And so I focused all my remaining strength, all my remaining will on a single thought: protect Lily. The darkness recoiled, momentarily stunned by the force of my intent. The creature faltered, its grip loosening slightly. It was a fleeting opportunity, a sliver of space in the encroaching oblivion, but it was enough. I used the last vestige of my power to channel the energy of the journal, the artifact that had both cursed and saved me. The leather-bound book pulsed with a surge of power, its pages glowing with an ethereal light. I slammed the book shut, focusing all my energy into that single, decisive action. The journal erupted with a blinding flash, a wave of pure, unadulterated force that ripped through the darkness. The creature shrieked, recoiling from the blast. Its grip on me loosened further, allowing me to break free from its embrace. I stumbled backward away from the creature towards the edge of the wall. My body was weak, my mind fragmented, but I had to keep moving. I had to give Lily time to escape. The creature recovered quickly, its eyes burning with fury. It lunged towards me again, its skeletal limbs reaching for my throat. I knew that I couldn't fight it. I was too weak, too damaged, but I could delay it. I could buy Lily some time. I stepped forward, meeting the creature's charge head-on. I grabbed its wrists, locking my arms around its bony limbs. It struggled, its strength far exceeding mine, but I held on, refusing to let go. "Run, Lily," I shouted, my voice cracking with strain. "Get as far away from here as you can." The creature roared, its hot breath searing my face. It twisted and writhed, trying to break free from my grip. I held on tighter, knowing that my time was limited. The creature was too powerful, too relentless. It would eventually break free, and when it did, I didn't want to think about it. I focused on Lily, on the image of her running, of her escaping. That was all that mattered. The creature finally broke free, its skeletal hand slashing across my chest. Pain exploded through my body, a searing agony that threatened to overwhelm me. I stumbled backward, losing my grip on the creature. It lunged towards me again, its mouth open, its teeth bared. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But it never came. Instead, I felt a sudden jolt, a searing pain that ripped through my mind and body. The darkness recoiled, pushed back by an external force. I opened my eyes and saw it. Clara. She was standing behind the creature, her hands raised, her eyes glowing with power. She was channeling the energy of the storm, the raw, untamed forces of nature, and directing it at the creature. The creature shrieked, writhing in agony. It was no match for Clara's power. She had come back for us. She had risked her life to save us. I felt a surge of gratitude, a wave of warmth that washed over the darkness within me. Clara unleashed another blast of energy, striking the creature full force. It convulsed, its body contorting into unnatural shapes. And then it exploded. A shower of bone fragments and black ichor rained down around us. The creature was gone, reduced to nothing. Clara staggered backward, her face pale and drawn. She had expended a tremendous amount of energy, and she was barely able to stand. I rushed to her side, supporting her as she stumbled. "Are you all right?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. Clara nodded, her eyes meeting mine. "I'm fine," she said, her voice weak. "But we need to get out of here, now." I looked around, my heart pounding in my chest. Lily was gone. She had listened to me. She had escaped. I hoped. But there was no time to search for her, to confirm her safety. Blackwood would be alerted soon, and the hunt would begin. We had to leave, now. I helped Clara to her feet, and together, we limped away from the courtyard, leaving behind the horrors of Blackwood. We were broken, battered, and bruised, but we were alive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had escaped the darkness. We had survived Blackwood. But I knew that our journey was far from over. The whispers would still be there, haunting our dreams, tempting us to return. And somewhere out there in the darkness, Lily was running, fighting to survive. We had to find her. We had to protect her. We had to make sure that she never fell prey to the horrors of Blackwood. The fight had just begun. Chapter 11, Out of the Abyss. Leaving Blackwood was like emerging from a nightmare into a harsh, unforgiving dawn. The world outside felt both familiar and alien. The colors were too bright, the sounds too loud, the air too clean. After months of confinement within the sanatorium's oppressive walls, my senses were overwhelmed by the sheer normalcy of the world. Clara and I stumbled through the woods, our bodies aching, our minds reeling. We had no plan, no destination, no resources. We were fugitives, hunted by a powerful and ruthless enemy. Our immediate priority was to find shelter, a place to rest and recover. We stumbled upon an abandoned hunting cabin, a dilapidated structure nestled deep within the woods. It was small and cramped, but it offered a measure of protection from the elements. We barricaded the door, scavenged some firewood, and started a small fire in the hearth. The warmth was comforting, chasing away the lingering chill of Blackwood. As we sat by the fire, tending to our wounds, the silence between us was heavy with unspoken questions. I knew that Clara was waiting for me to speak, to explain my transformation, to justify my actions. I was changed, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Blackwood, it got inside my head, it twisted me, corrupted me, I lost myself. Clara nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. I know, she said. I saw it happening, the darkness. It's a powerful force. It can consume even the strongest minds. I thought I was doing the right thing, I said, my voice filled with shame. I thought I was protecting humanity, but I was wrong, so wrong. You were manipulated, Clara said. The director, he's a master of deception. He knows how to exploit vulnerabilities, how to twist the truth. I should have known better, I said. I should have seen through the lies. Don't blame yourself, Elias, Clara said. You were under immense pressure. You were fighting against forces you didn't understand. But I hurt people, I said. I did terrible things. I can't forgive myself. You can redeem yourself, Clara said, her voice firm. You can use your knowledge of Blackwood to stop them, to protect others from suffering the same fate. How? I asked, my voice filled with despair. Blackwood is too powerful. We can't stop them. We can try, Clara said. We have to try. We owe it to Lily. We owe it to all the victims of Blackwood. I looked at Clara, her face pale but resolute. Her unwavering determination inspired me, rekindling the spark of hope that had almost been extinguished. What do we do? I asked. First, we need to find Lily, Clara said. She's the key to everything. Blackwood will stop at nothing to get her back. Where do we start? I asked. I have an idea, Clara said. There's an old friend of mine, a former colleague. He's an expert on the occult, a scholar of ancient lore. He might be able to help us track Lily to understand the nature of her powers. Where does he live? I asked. He lives in a small town a few hours from here, Clara said. It's a safe place, a place where Blackwood wouldn't expect us to go. Then let's go, I said, standing up. We packed our meager belongings and set off, leaving the abandoned hunting cabin behind. The journey was long and arduous, but we pressed on, driven by a sense of urgency, a determination to save Lily from the clutches of Blackwood. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The whispers were still there, a constant murmur in the back of my mind, growing louder with each passing day. I knew that Blackwood was searching for us, closing in. We were running out of time. We had to find Lily. We had to stop the darkness, or all would be lost. Chapter 12, Seeking Armitage. The town of Arkham Haven was a relic of a bygone era. Nestled amidst rolling hills and shrouded in perpetual mist, it possessed an unsettling tranquility, a sense of isolation that seemed to seep into the very bones of its inhabitants. The weathered buildings, the cobblestone streets, the ancient graveyard overlooking the town, all spoke of a history steeped in mystery and whispered secrets. It was a place where the veil between worlds felt thin, a place where the echoes of the past lingered in the present, a place where, I suspected, Clara's friend, Professor Armitage, would feel right at home. We arrived late in the afternoon, the sky a canvas of bruised purples and grays. The townsfolk eyed us with suspicion, their faces etched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. We were strangers in their midst, outsiders who disrupted the delicate balance of their secluded existence. Clara led me to a small, unassuming house on the edge of town. It was shrouded in ivy, its windows dark and uninviting. A sense of foreboding hung in the air, a silent warning that made my skin crawl. Clara knocked on the door, her knuckles rapping against the aged wood. The silence that followed was broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a dog. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, gaunt figure silhouetted against the darkness within. He had a long, thin face, framed by a shock of white hair, and his eyes burned with an unsettling intensity. "Clara," he said, his voice a low, raspy whisper, "is that really you?" "Professor Armitage," Clara said, her voice filled with relief. "It's been too long." "Indeed it has," Armitage said, stepping aside to allow us entry. Come in, you're both looking unwell." The interior of the house was even more unsettling than the exterior. It was filled with ancient books, strange artifacts, and bizarre contraptions that seemed to hum with unseen energy. The air was thick with the smell of incense, dust, and something else, something that reminded me of the chamber of the Nexus. Armitage led us to a small, cluttered study where he gestured for us to sit. He examined us closely, his eyes piercing and assessing. "Blackwood," he said, his voice filled with dread, "you've been touched by the darkness." Clara nodded, explaining our escape, our alliance, and our desperate need to find Lily. Armitage listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. When Clara finished, he sighed, shaking his head. "Blackwood is a cancer," he said, "a festering wound on the soul of humanity. I've dedicated my life to studying its history, to understanding its methods." "Then you can help us find Lily," I asked, my voice filled with hope. I can try, Armitage said, but it won't be easy. Lily is a powerful conduit, a beacon that draws the attention of the others. Blackwood will be watching her closely. What can we do? Clara asked. We need to understand the nature of her powers, Armitage said. We need to learn how to shield her from the influence of the darkness. He led us to a bookshelf filled with ancient tomes, selecting several volumes with care. These books contain the secrets of the human psyche, the keys to unlocking its hidden potential, he said. Study them, Clara. You have a gift for this sort of thing. Elias, you will need to learn to shield your mind. Blackwood's influence is still strong within you. Can you track her? I asked to see where she is heading. I have ways, he said, but I will need time and certain ingredients. It will be dangerous. We are used to dangerous, I said. Then I will prepare, he said, his voice taking on a note of grim determination. There may be something that could help us down here, in my basement. Armitage led the way down to a stone basement. The temperature was very cold, and the walls were damp with moisture. I should warn you, Armitage said, what I do down here may disturb you. The sight in the basement was shocking. Chalk circles were drawn on the floor. There were candles, and there were diagrams of arcane nature all over the walls. Do you perform rituals here? I asked. One has to fight fire with fire sometimes, Armitage said. Chapter 13, The Scrying. The rituals Armitage performed were unsettling, a blend of arcane knowledge and raw, untamed energy. He spoke in forgotten languages, traced symbols in the air with trembling hands, and summoned forces that seemed to vibrate the very foundations of the house. The air crackled with power, a palpable tension that made my skin crawl. Clara, despite her own knowledge of the occult, watched Armitage with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. I, still grappling with the remnants of Blackwood's influence, found the rituals deeply disturbing. They stirred something within me, a dark echo of the power I had once wielded. Armitage explained that he was attempting to scry Lily's location, to pierce the veil of reality and glimpse her path through the tangled web of fate. He needed specific ingredients, rare herbs and ancient artifacts, to focus his energies and amplify his senses. While Armitage prepared his rituals, Clara and I immersed ourselves in the ancient tomes he had provided. We devoured the texts, poring over diagrams of the human psyche, studying the methods of shielding the mind from external influence. The more I learned, the more I understood the scope of Blackwood's manipulation. The sanatorium wasn't just a place of madness and suffering. It was a training ground, a forge where vulnerable minds were molded into weapons. The patients were not simply sacrifices. They were resources, tools to be used in the war against the entities beyond. I felt a surge of anger, a burning desire to make Blackwood pay for its crimes. I had been a victim, a pawn in their twisted game, but I wouldn't let them win. I would use my knowledge, my skills to bring them down. After days of intense preparation, Armitage announced that he was ready to attempt the scrying. He led us down to his basement, the air thick with the scent of incense and ozone. The chalk circles on the floor glowed with an eerie light, The symbols on the walls seemed to writhe and shift. Armitage stood in the center of the circle, his eyes closed, his hands raised. He began to chant, his voice a low, guttural whisper that grew louder with each passing moment. The air around him shimmered, the temperature dropping sharply. Suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness. A collective gasp escaped Clara and I as we saw a vision of the area Lily was. Armitage was showing us where she was. "There," Armitage shouted. "I see her, she's." Suddenly, the lights flashed back on, and Armitage was on the ground. "It was too powerful," he said. "Whatever Blackwood is doing with that child, it's going to doom us all." Chapter 14. Widow's Peak Beckons. Armitage lay on the cold stone floor, gasping for breath, his face ashen. The energy from the scrying had clearly taken a toll, draining him of his strength. "What did you see?" Clara asked, her voice filled with concern. "Where is Lily?" Armitage struggled to sit up, his hand trembling as he reached for a glass of water. She's in danger," he said, his voice weak. "They're taking her to the old lighthouse, on Widow's Peak." Widow's Peak. The name sent a chill down my spine. It was a desolate, windswept promontory overlooking the ocean, a place steeped in local legend. The lighthouse, abandoned for decades, was said to be haunted by the spirits of sailors lost at sea. "What are they planning to do there?" Clara asked. "I don't know," Armitage said, "but it's not good, the lighthouse. It's a conduit, a focal point for energies both terrestrial and otherwise." "We have to stop them," I said, my voice filled with urgency. "It's a trap," Armitage warned. "Blackwood knows we're coming. They'll be waiting for us." "We don't have a choice," Clara said. "We can't let them sacrifice Lily." Armitage sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Very well," he said, "but you'll need to be prepared. The lighthouse is a dangerous place. It's filled with echoes, residual energies from past tragedies." "What do you mean?" I asked. "The lighthouse has seen much suffering," Armitage said. "Shipwrecks, storms, madness. All these events have left their mark on the building. They've created pockets of instability, places where the veil between worlds is thin." "What can we do to protect ourselves?" Clara asked. Armitage led us to a small cabinet, pulling out 2 tarnished silver amulets. "These will offer some protection against the echoes," he said. "They'll help to shield your minds from the negative energies." He handed us the amulets, his eyes filled with concern. "Be careful," he said. "The lighthouse is a place of great power, but it's also a place of great danger." We left Armitage's house, the amulets clutched tightly in our hands. The journey to Widow's Peak was long and arduous, the road winding through dense forests and along treacherous cliffs. As we drove, the sky grew darker, the wind stronger. A storm was brewing, mirroring the turmoil within my own soul. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Blackwood was waiting for us, I knew it, but we had to keep going. We had to save Lily. As we approached Widow's Peak, the lighthouse loomed into view, a tall, stark structure silhouetted against the stormy sky. It stood on the edge of the promontory, battered by wind and waves, a sentinel against the encroaching darkness. A sense of foreboding washed over me, a cold, heavy weight that settled in the pit of my stomach. I knew that we were about to enter a place of great power, a place where the line between reality and nightmare was blurred. But I was ready. I had faced the darkness within myself. I had survived Blackwood, and I would do whatever it took to protect Lily, to stop the forces that threatened to consume her. The battle was about to begin. Chapter 15. Approaching the storm. The storm raged as we approached the lighthouse, the wind howling like a banshee, the rain lashing against our faces. The path leading to the entrance was treacherous, a narrow strip of land clinging to the edge of the cliff. The waves crashed against the rocks below, sending up plumes of spray that soaked us to the bone. As we neared the lighthouse, I saw them, figures silhouetted against the dim light emanating from within. Blackwood's enforcers. They were waiting for us. I pulled Clara behind a large rock, shielding her from view. "They're here," I whispered. "We need to be careful." "How many?" Clara asked. "At least 4, I said. "Maybe more." "We can't take them head on," Clara said. "We need a plan." I scanned the area, searching for a way to approach the lighthouse undetected. The terrain was unforgiving, offering little in the way of cover. Then I saw it. A narrow path leading down to a small cove, hidden from view by a cluster of jagged rocks. It was a risky route, but it offered a chance to flank the enforcers and gain a tactical advantage. "I have an idea," I said. "Follow me." We crept down the path, our movements slow and deliberate. The waves crashed against the rocks below, their roar drowning out any noise we might make. The cove was small and secluded, a hidden sanctuary battered by wind and waves. I saw a narrow passage leading up to the base of the lighthouse. It was a tight squeeze, but it offered a chance to reach the entrance undetected. "This is it," I whispered. "Stay close." We squeezed through the passage, our bodies scraping against the cold, damp stone. The air was thick with the smell of brine and decay. We emerged at the base of the lighthouse, hidden from view by a large pile of driftwood. The entrance was just a few feet away, a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bars. I peered through a gap in the driftwood, assessing the situation. The enforcers were patrolling the area, their faces grim, their weapons at the ready. "We need to create a distraction," Clara whispered. "Something to draw them away from the entrance." I thought for a moment, my mind racing. Then an idea struck me. "I have something that might work," I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out the journal, the leather-bound book that had both cursed and saved me. It was still radiating energy, a tangible presence in my hand. "What are you going to do?" Clara asked. "Trust me," I said. I opened the journal and began to read aloud, reciting passages from the ancient texts, invoking the power of the darkness. The words were like a key, unlocking the secrets of the lighthouse, amplifying the energies that lingered within. The air around us shimmered, the temperature dropping sharply. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. The enforcers stopped patrolling, their heads turning towards the source of the disturbance. Their faces were filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I continued reading, my voice growing louder with each passing word. The lighthouse began to vibrate, the walls shaking, the windows rattling. The enforcers started to move towards us, their weapons raised. Now, I shouted. Clara sprang into action, unleashing a blast of energy that struck the enforcers head on. They staggered backward, their bodies convulsing. I grabbed the door, throwing it open and charging into the lighthouse. The battle had begun. Chapter 16. Within the Beacon. The interior of the lighthouse was a chilling testament to the ravages of time and the echoes of tragedy. The circular stairwell, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, spiraled upwards into the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of salt, mildew, and a faint, metallic tang. The same metallic tang I'd first noticed at Blackwood. The lower levels were a labyrinth of dimly lit rooms, filled with the remnants of the lighthouse keeper's life. Tattered furniture, rusted tools, and yellowed photographs that stared back at me with vacant eyes. The wind whistled through the broken windows, carrying with it the mournful cries of the sea. As we ascended the stairwell, the whispers intensified, swirling around us like a malevolent fog. They were seductive, promising power, knowledge, and oblivion. They were also increasingly laced with visions, fleeting glimpses of what was to come, of the horrors that awaited us at the top. "We need to find Lily," Clara said, her voice strained, "and quickly." I nodded, pushing the whispers from my mind, focusing on the task at hand. The enforcers, I knew, would be following us. We had to move quickly or they would corner us and the battle would be lost. We reached the first landing and found ourselves in a small room that had once served as the lighthouse keeper's living quarters. The room was filled with a collection of nautical charts, maps, and logbooks. A single, cobweb-draped window offered a view of the raging sea below. "This place, it's filled with residual energy," Clara said, her gaze scanning the room. "The lighthouse has witnessed so much tragedy, so much death." I agreed. I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on us. I knew, on some level, that the lighthouse was more than just a building. It was a nexus of psychic energy, a place where the boundaries between worlds were thin. As we searched the room, I noticed a small wooden box tucked away in a corner. I opened it, finding a collection of old photographs. The faces in the photos were haunting, depicting generations of lighthouse keepers, their expressions ranging from stoic to melancholic. In the center of the collection, I found a single faded photograph of a young girl. She was smiling, her eyes bright, her hair long and flowing. She looked vaguely familiar, and a chill shot down my spine. "Lily," I whispered, recognizing the child. We pressed on, ascending the stairwell, pushing through the ever-present darkness. The next landing brought us to the engine room, a cavernous space filled with rusted machinery. The air was thick with the smell of oil and decay. The machinery seemed to hum with a faint, unnatural energy, as if it were still functioning, still waiting for a purpose. The whispers here were particularly strong, weaving tales of madness and despair, conjuring images of shipwrecks and lost souls. I felt a wave of nausea, a wave of darkness that threatened to engulf me. "We're getting close," Clara said, her voice strained. "I can feel it." And then we heard them. Footsteps echoing from below, ascending the stairwell. The enforcers were coming. We ducked into a small storage closet and slammed the door shut, barely concealing ourselves in the cramped space. The footsteps grew closer, the sounds of their breathing filling the air. They passed our hiding place, their heavy boots thudding on the wooden steps. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. After what seemed like an eternity, the footsteps faded, receding further up the stairwell. We waited for a few minutes, then slowly emerged from the closet, our bodies trembling. "We need to find Lily," Clara said, her voice filled with urgency. "And we need to get to the top of the lighthouse. That's where the ritual will take place." We continued our ascent, the whispers growing louder, the visions more intense. And then we reached the top. The lamp room. The circular space was dominated by the massive Fresnel lens, a complex arrangement of glass prisms designed to focus the light. The lens was inactive now, covered in dust and cobwebs. In the center of the room, tied to a chair, was Lily. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. She was surrounded by the enforcers, their faces grim, their weapons raised. And standing over her, his skeletal frame silhouetted against the window, was the director. The ritual had begun. Chapter 17, Ritual Interrupted. The director stood over Lily, his silhouette stark against the raging storm outside. His red eyes, burning with an unholy light, fixed on the terrified child. The enforcers, their faces impassive, formed a semicircle around them, their weapons trained on us as we emerged from the stairwell. "Well, well," the director said, his voice a low, rasping whisper. "It seems our guests have arrived." My heart clenched. We were too late. The ritual had already begun. I could feel the energy emanating from the room, a palpable force that twisted the air and made my skin crawl. "Let her go," I demanded, stepping forward. "Elias," the director said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "You disappoint me. I thought you had learned your lesson." "You're monsters," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You're using her. You're going to destroy her." "We are merely protecting humanity," the director said, "from the horrors that lie beyond. And Lily, she is the key to securing our victory." "She's just a child," Clara shouted, stepping forward beside me. "Leave her alone." The enforcers shifted, their weapons pointing at us. The air crackled with tension. "You can't stop us," the director said. "The ritual is already underway. Lily's connection is strong." The enforcers, I realized, were no longer human. They were vessels, empty shells animated by some dark force, their will subjugated to the director's command. They moved with a chilling efficiency, their faces devoid of any emotion. "What have you done to her?" I asked, my voice filled with despair. "We have enhanced her abilities," the director said. "We have opened her mind to the power of the Nexus. She can see them now, the entities, the horrors that dwell beyond the veil. She can hear their whispers, feel their hunger." Lily looked at us, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and understanding. It was as if she knew what was happening, as if she was trying to communicate with us. The director turned his attention back to Lily, placing a hand on her forehead. He began to chant, his voice rising in pitch, his words a torrent of forgotten languages. The lamp room began to shake, the Fresnel lens rattling in its housing. The whispers intensified, swirling around us, filling our minds with images of madness and despair. I could see the entities now, the horrors that Lily described. They were faint, shadowy figures in the periphery, their forms shifting and contorting. They were drawn to Lily, drawn to the source of the power. Clara and I exchanged a glance. We knew that we had to act, now. "We can still stop him," Clara said, her voice barely audible. "But we have to be careful. We don't know what they're capable of." I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation. I remembered the silver amulets Armitage had given us, a source of potential protection. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. The amulets had seemed like a good idea at the time, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be enough. The director's chanting reached a crescendo. The lamp room vibrated violently, the very air around us crackling with energy. I knew we had to act immediately. "Now," I shouted, lunging forward. Clara followed, unleashing a blast of energy that struck one of the enforcers head-on. The enforcer staggered, its body convulsing. I moved quickly, trying to keep the enforcers off balance. I grabbed one of the enforcers, attempting to disarm him. However, it was like fighting a robot. It was emotionless, relentless, and completely devoted to its mission. They were too strong, their movements too precise. Clara, her face contorted with effort, was firing energy bolts at the enforcers, but they seemed to be barely affected. The director merely smiled, his eyes fixed on Lily. The ritual was reaching its peak. I realized that we weren't going to win this battle. We had to save Lily. I changed my focus. I had to free her no matter the cost. I dodged past an enforcer and lunged towards Lily, trying to reach her, to cut the ropes that bound her to the chair. The enforcers swarmed me, their weapons trained on me. One of them struck me with the butt of its gun, sending me sprawling to the ground. The director laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the lamp room. Lily looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. She knew what was happening. She knew that I was going to fail. And then the world exploded. Chapter 18, Lily Unleashed. The explosion wasn't physical, not in the conventional sense. It was a psychic eruption, a release of raw, untamed energy that tore through the lamp room, shattering the delicate balance between worlds. The air shimmered, the walls warped, and the boundaries of reality seemed to dissolve. The source of the explosion was Lily. She had somehow tapped into the power of the Nexus, unleashing its energy in a desperate attempt to protect herself. The energy surged through her, amplified her abilities, and transformed her into something more. The director recoiled, his face contorted with shock and fury. His chanting faltered, his connection to the ritual disrupted. The enforcers were thrown back by the force of the blast, their bodies slamming against the walls. They were no longer under the director's control, their movements erratic, their minds fractured. Clara and I were thrown to the ground, our heads spinning, our bodies aching. The silver amulets hummed with energy, struggling to protect us from the psychic onslaught. I looked at Lily, and I barely recognized her. Her eyes were glowing with an ethereal light, her hair floating around her like a halo. She was radiating power, an almost unbearable force that threatened to overwhelm me. She had become a conduit, a vessel for the Nexus, but unlike the other sacrifices, she was in control. She was channeling the energy, directing it, using it to defend herself. The entities were drawn to her, swarming around her, their forms now visible to the naked eye. They were monstrous shapes, twisted and distorted, their faces filled with a hunger that chilled me to the bone. But Lily was not afraid. She faced them, her eyes blazing with defiance. She raised her hands, unleashing a torrent of energy that sent the entities scattering. She was fighting back. The director, recovering from the blast, snarled with fury. He raised his hands, attempting to regain control of the ritual. "You can't stop me," he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "I will not allow you to destroy everything." He unleashed a wave of psychic energy, targeting Lily, trying to subdue her, to reclaim her for Blackwood. Lily met his attack with her own power, a surge of energy that collided with the director's assault. The resulting clash was deafening, a cacophony of psychic force that threatened to shatter our minds. Clara, despite her injuries, struggled to her feet. She saw what was happening, and she knew that we had to help Lily. "We need to sever his connection," she said, her voice strained. "We need to break his control." "How?" I asked, my head spinning. "The Fresnel lens," Clara said, pointing to the massive array of glass prisms that dominated the room. "It's amplifying the energy. It's focusing his power." I understood. The director was using the lens to channel the energy of the Nexus, to enhance his abilities to control Lily. If we could disable the lens, we could weaken his power, give Lily a chance to escape. I nodded, struggling to my feet. I staggered towards the lens, the whispers swirling around me, trying to distract me, to deter me from my purpose. I ignored them, focusing on Lily, on the hope of saving her. I reached the lens and began to climb, my hands slipping on the smooth glass. The structure was unstable, the whole thing shaking with energy. I ignored the danger, focusing on the task at hand. I reached the top of the lens, finding the mechanism that controlled its alignment. I pulled the lever, severing the connection. The lamp room shuddered, the energy dissipating, the director's control weakening. Lily seized the opportunity, unleashing a final surge of power that sent the director flying backward, crashing against the wall. He slumped to the ground, unconscious. The enforcers, no longer under his control, collapsed, their bodies lifeless. The lamp room was silent, the whispers faded, the energy dissipated. The battle was over. Chapter 19: Aftermath and Escape. Silence descended upon the lamp room, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy that had permeated it moments before. The storm outside still raged, But within the lighthouse, a strange stillness prevailed, as if the very air itself held its breath. I stumbled towards Lily, my body aching, my mind reeling. She stood in the center of the room, her eyes still glowing with an ethereal light, her hair still floating around her like a halo. But the overwhelming power, the raw, untamed energy, had subsided. She looked exhausted, drained, as if she had expended every last ounce of her strength. "Lily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "are you all right?" She looked at me, her eyes focusing, her expression softening. The glow in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a familiar spark of innocence. "Elias," she said, her voice weak, I don't understand what happened." "You were amazing," I said, reaching out to her. "You saved us. You saved yourself." I untied the ropes that bound her to the chair, pulling her into a tight embrace. Her small body trembled against mine. "It's over," I said, my voice gentle. "You're safe now." Clara approached, her face etched with exhaustion but also with relief. She examined Lily, checking for injuries. "She's drained," Clara said, "but she'll be all right. She just needs rest." We looked around the lamp room, surveying the aftermath of the battle. The director lay unconscious against the wall, his body slumped and lifeless. The enforcers were sprawled on the floor, their faces blank, their eyes vacant. The lighthouse had been irrevocably changed, its energies disrupted, its past traumas amplified. It was no longer a place of power, but a place of ruin. "We need to leave," Clara said. "This place is unstable. It could collapse at any moment." I nodded, agreeing with her assessment. We had accomplished our mission. We had saved Lily. Now we had to escape. We helped Lily down the stairwell, our movements slow and cautious. The darkness seemed to press in on us, the whispers lingering in the shadows. As we descended, I noticed something that I had missed before. In one of the rooms, tucked away in a corner, was a small wooden chest. It was ornately carved, its surface covered in intricate symbols. Curiosity piqued. I opened the chest. Inside, I found a collection of old photographs, letters, and documents. They belonged to the lighthouse keepers, the men and women who had dedicated their lives to maintaining the beacon, to protecting the coast from the dangers of the sea. I scanned the documents, my eyes widening with surprise. They revealed a secret history, a hidden truth about the lighthouse. It wasn't just a beacon. It was a ward, a protection against the entities beyond. The lighthouse keepers hadn't just been maintaining a light. They had been maintaining a barrier, preventing the darkness from encroaching upon the world. Blackwood had known about this, I realized. They had deliberately chosen the lighthouse as the site for their ritual, intending to break the ward, to unleash the horrors that lay beyond. I closed the chest, my heart pounding in my chest. The fight wasn't over as I once thought. We merely won this battle. The war continues, and who knew how Blackwood would unleash more horror into the world. We left the lighthouse, emerging into the raging storm. The wind and rain lashed against our faces, but we pressed on, driven by a sense of urgency. We reached the base of the promontory and began to make our way towards the town. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The whispers were still there, haunting our dreams, tempting us to return. The darkness was still out there, waiting for its opportunity. We had survived Blackwood, but had we truly escaped? Or would the horrors of the sanatorium continue to haunt us for the rest of our days? A question mark that floated as the only possibility. I looked at Lily, her face pale but resolute. She was a survivor. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. She was the hope of the future, and I would do everything in my power to protect her, no matter the cost. Chapter 20, to Scotland. The storm raged on, mirroring the turmoil within me. We pressed onward, leaving Widow's Peak behind, the image of the lighthouse, a stark sentinel against a churning sky, seared into my memory. It was a place of both horror and triumph, a crucible where our fears had been forged into resolve. We limped into Arkham Haven, seeking refuge from the storm and the ever-present threat of Blackwood. The town, once a haven of unsettling tranquility, now seemed menacing, the shadows deeper, the whispers louder. Armitage's house offered a temporary sanctuary. He greeted us with a mixture of relief and concern, his eyes scanning us for injuries. "You did it," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "You stopped them." "For now," Clara corrected, her face grim. "But Blackwood is far from defeated." We huddled around the fire, sharing our story, recounting the horrors of the lighthouse, the director's twisted intentions, and Lily's incredible power. Armitage listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. When we finished, he sighed, shaking his head. "Blackwood is growing bolder," he said. "Their reach is extending, their influence spreading. We need to find a way to stop them once and for all." "How?" I asked, my voice filled with despair. "They're too powerful. We can't fight them alone." "We're not alone," Armitage said, his eyes gleaming with a newfound determination. "There are others who know about Blackwood, who have fought against them in the past. We need to find them to unite our forces." "Who are these others?" Clara asked. "They are a disparate group," Armitage said. "Scholars, investigators, survivors. Individuals who have been touched by the darkness, who have dedicated their lives to fighting against it." "Where can we find them?" I asked. "They are scattered across the world," Armitage said. "But I know of one, a former colleague who lives in a small town in Scotland. He's an expert on ancient lore, a master of occult knowledge. He might be able to provide us with the information we need to defeat Blackwood." "What's his name?" Clara asked. "Professor McAllister," Armitage said. "He lives in a remote village, nestled in the Scottish Highlands. He's a recluse, a hermit, but he's also one of the most brilliant minds I've ever known." "Then we need to go to Scotland," I said, my voice filled with resolve. "It's a long journey," Clara said, "and dangerous. Blackwood will be watching us. They'll know where we're going." "We have to take the risk," I said. "We have to find McAllister. He's our only hope." Armitage nodded, agreeing with my assessment. "I will provide you with what assistance I can," he said. "I will give you a letter of introduction, vouching for your character. I will also provide you with some resources, some artifacts that may prove useful on your journey." He led us to his study, gathering a collection of ancient books, maps, and amulets. He handed them to us with a solemn expression. "Be careful," he said. "The road ahead will be perilous. Blackwood will stop at nothing to prevent you from reaching Mac Allister. But you must not give up hope. The fate of the world may depend on it." We prepared to leave Arkham Haven, steeling ourselves for the journey ahead. Lily, exhausted but resilient, clung to my side, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. As we walked through the town, the whispers seemed to grow louder, more menacing. I could feel the eyes of the townsfolk upon us, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and dread. I knew that we were leaving a trail, a path that Blackwood could easily follow. We had to be vigilant. We had to be prepared for anything. As we reached the outskirts of town, I paused, looking back at Armitage's house. He stood in the doorway, his face etched with concern. He raised his hand in farewell, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. Then he turned and disappeared inside, leaving us to face the darkness alone. We continued our journey, heading towards the coast, towards the ships that would carry us across the Atlantic, towards the ancient lands of Scotland. We were fugitives, hunted by a powerful and ruthless enemy, but we were not alone. We had each other, and we had a mission: to find Mac Allister, to stop Blackwood, to save the world. Chapter 21: Whispers on the Gray Sea. The voyage across the Atlantic was a torment of endless gray. Gray skies, gray seas, gray moods clinging to us like the perpetual mist that seemed to follow our every step. The ship, a creaking freighter carrying a cargo of lumber and faded dreams, offered little comfort. The other passengers, a motley collection of drifters and wanderers, kept their distance, sensing the darkness that clung to us like a shroud. I spent most of my time on deck, gazing out at the endless horizon, trying to escape the whispers that haunted my thoughts. The vastness of the ocean, the immensity of the sky, offered a temporary respite from the claustrophobic confines of my own mind. Clara tended to Lily, reading her stories, teaching her ancient lore, preparing her for the challenges that lay ahead. She was a surrogate mother now, a protector, a guide. Her bond with Lily was growing stronger with each passing day, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. The whispers never ceased. They followed me relentlessly, tempting me with promises of power, urging me to return to Blackwood to embrace my destiny. They knew my weaknesses, my fears, my lingering doubts. They preyed on my guilt, reminding me of the terrible things I had done, the innocent lives I had ruined. It was a constant struggle to resist their influence, to cling to my sanity, to maintain my resolve. I relied on the memory of Lily, on the image of her innocent face, to keep me grounded, to remind me of what I was fighting for. One night, as the storm raged outside, I had a dream. It was vivid, terrifying, unlike anything I had experienced before. I was back in Blackwood, wandering through the familiar corridors, the whispers swirling around me like a suffocating fog. But the sanatorium was different now, transformed into a monstrous labyrinth of twisted hallways and shifting rooms. The walls were covered in writhing symbols, the air thick with the stench of decay. I saw the patients, the sacrifices, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed, their bodies contorted into unnatural shapes. They reached out to me, their voices pleading, their touch icy cold. Then I saw the director. He was standing in the center of the chamber of the Nexus, his eyes burning with an unholy light. He raised his hands, summoning the entities, unleashing the horrors that dwelled beyond the veil. The entities swarmed around me, their forms grotesque, their hunger insatiable. They reached for me, their claws tearing at my flesh. I screamed, trying to escape, but there was nowhere to run. The labyrinth closed in around me, the walls collapsing, the darkness consuming me. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers were louder than ever, urging me to surrender, to give in to the darkness. I stumbled out of bed and went to check on Lily. She was sleeping soundly, her face peaceful, her body still. I sat beside her, watching her, protecting her. She was the only thing that mattered. As dawn approached, the storm began to subside. The sky cleared, revealing a sliver of light on the horizon. A new day was dawning. But I knew that the darkness was still out there, waiting for its opportunity. We had reached Scotland, but our journey was far from over. The whispers would continue to haunt us. The battle would continue to rage. And the fate of the world would hang in the balance. It was getting so hard to fight against them when everything that was in the world seemed to want him to let go. If they were going to make it, there was only one path now, a path that no one had ever taken before. That path was Chapter 22, MacAllister Estate. The Scottish Highlands were a landscape of stark beauty and haunting mystery. Jagged mountains, mist-shrouded lochs, and wind-swept moors formed a panorama that whispered of ancient secrets and forgotten gods. The air was crisp and clean, yet held a chill that seemed to penetrate to the very bone. It was a place where the past was not merely remembered, but felt, a place where the echoes of history resonated with an almost palpable intensity. We arrived in the small village nestled at the foot of the mountains, a cluster of stone cottages huddled together against the harsh elements. The villagers, a close-knit community steeped in tradition, eyed us with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. They were a people who valued their privacy, and they were wary of outsiders. Clara had secured lodging for us at the local inn, a cozy establishment with a crackling fireplace and a hearty pub. The innkeeper, a stout woman with a warm smile and a shrewd gaze, seemed to sense our unease, offering us a comforting welcome. "Ye look like ye have seen a ghost, ye do," she said, her voice thick with a Scottish brogue. "But dinna worry, ye are safe here, for now at least." We learned that Professor MacAllister lived on a remote estate, a few miles from the village, accessible only by a winding, treacherous road. The villagers spoke of him in hushed tones, describing him as a brilliant but eccentric scholar, a recluse who had dedicated his life to studying the ancient lore of the Highlands. They also spoke of strange occurrences around his estate, of eerie lights, unsettling sounds, and a sense of foreboding that permeated the surrounding area. "He's dabbling in things best left undisturbed," the innkeeper said, her voice low and ominous. "Things that have been buried for centuries. Best stay away if ye ask me." But we couldn't stay away. Professor McAllister was our only hope, the key to unlocking the secrets of Blackwood, the man who could help us save Lily. We set off the next morning, hearing a local guide to navigate the treacherous road. The journey was long and arduous, the scenery both breathtaking and unsettling. As we approached the estate, a thick fog descended, shrouding the landscape in an eerie silence. The air grew colder, the whispers louder. The estate itself was a Gothic monstrosity, a sprawling mansion perched on a lonely hill. It was surrounded by overgrown gardens, crumbling walls, and ancient, gnarled trees that seemed to claw at the sky. The windows were dark and uninviting, the door a massive, oak structure that seemed to defy any attempts to open it. We stood before the gate, our hearts pounding in our chests. We knew that we were walking into a place of great power, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. "Are you ready?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "As ready as we'll ever be," I said, my hand trembling. I reached for the gate and pushed it open. We stepped onto the grounds of the McAllister estate, and the darkness embraced us. Chapter 23: The Gatekeeper. The grounds of McAllister estate were a landscape of deliberate decay. What once must have been manicured gardens were now a riot of overgrown vegetation, thorny bushes and crumbling statues. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something subtly metallic, reminiscent of blood. Twisted, gnarled trees reached out like skeletal arms, their branches scraping against the mansion's stone walls. The fog clung to everything, softening the edges of reality and amplifying the sense of isolation. We followed a winding path, barely visible beneath the overgrowth towards the mansion. The whispers intensified, swirling around us, but now they seemed different, more inquisitive than menacing. They felt curious, as if the very air itself was scrutinizing us, assessing our worth. The mansion loomed closer, its Gothic architecture imposing and unsettling. The windows were dark and empty, like vacant eyes staring out at us. The massive oak door, studded with iron, seemed impenetrable. We reached the door and I hesitantly knocked, the sound echoing eerily in the silence. A long moment stretched out, broken only by the wind whistling through the trees. Then a small peephole in the door slid open, revealing a single, piercing blue eye. The eye studied us for a long moment, then the peephole snapped shut. We waited, our hearts pounding in our chests. I could feel the presence of something within the mansion, something ancient and powerful, scrutinizing us, judging us. Finally, the heavy bolts of the door groaned open, and the door swung inward, revealing a tall, thin figure silhouetted against the darkness within. He had long, silver hair that cascaded down his shoulders, a face etched with the wisdom and weariness of ages, and eyes that burned with an unnerving intensity. He was dressed in a long, dark robe, adorned with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe as I looked at them. "You seek knowledge," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "But knowledge comes at a price." It was Professor McAllister. We're friends of Professor Armitage, Clara said, stepping forward. He sent us to you. Mac Allister studied us for a moment, his eyes piercing our souls. Armitage, a good man but prone to distractions. What do you seek? Blackwood, I said, my voice trembling. We need to stop them before they destroy everything. Mac Allister's eyes narrowed. Blackwood, a persistent plague. Come in, he said, stepping aside to allow us entry. We have much to discuss. The interior of the mansion was even more unsettling than the exterior. It was a labyrinth of dimly lit rooms, filled with ancient books, strange artifacts, and bizarre contraptions that seemed to hum with unseen energy. The air was thick with the scent of incense, dust, and something else. Something akin to ozone, crackling with arcane power. Mac Allister led us to a large study, where he gestured for us to sit. He seated himself behind a massive oak desk, its surface cluttered with papers, scrolls, and various curiosities. Tell me everything, he said, his eyes fixed on us. Start from the beginning. We recounted our experiences, detailing our escape from Blackwood, our encounter with Armitage, and our desperate journey to Scotland. Mac Allister listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grim. When we finished, he sighed, shaking his head. Blackwood is accelerating their plans, he said. The ritual at the lighthouse was just a prelude. They are preparing to unleash something far more powerful. What is it? Clara asked, her voice filled with apprehension. They seek to open a gateway, Mac Allister said, to breach the veil between worlds and allow the entities beyond to cross over into our reality. How can we stop them? I asked, my voice filled with despair. Mac Allister paused, his eyes gazing into the distance, as if searching for answers in the depths of his own soul. There is a way, he said, his voice barely audible. But it is dangerous. It requires a sacrifice. And as he said those words, I knew what was coming. I knew what I had to do. We all knew the next step, and we could see it coming. Chapter 24, The Inevitable Sacrifice. A chill settled over the study, deeper than the inherent dampness of the ancient mansion. The word sacrifice hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Mac Allister's piercing blue eyes bored into mine, seeming to see past the surface, probing the very core of my being. What kind of sacrifice? Clara asked, her voice cautious. Lily, sensing the shift in atmosphere, huddled closer to Clara, her eyes wide with apprehension. Mac Allister steepled his fingers, his gaze unwavering. Blackwood seeks to open a gateway, a portal through which entities from beyond can enter our world. To close such a gateway requires a power of equal magnitude, a counterbalance, a sacrifice. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The entity that Blackwood seeks to unleash is drawn to power, to energy. To seal the gateway, we need to create a null point, a void that will repel the entity, sever its connection to our world. This requires the willing sacrifice of a powerful conduit, someone with a strong connection to the nexus, someone like Lily. The air left my lungs. I stared at Mac Allister, my mind reeling, struggling to comprehend the implications of his words. Lily, sacrifice. It was unthinkable. No, I said, my voice trembling. There has to be another way. We can't sacrifice her. She's just a child. Mac Allister's expression softened, but his resolve remained firm. I understand your reluctance, Elias, but there is no other way. Blackwood is on the verge of succeeding. If we do nothing, countless lives will be lost. The fabric of reality itself will be torn apart. Clara remained silent, her face etched with anguish. She knew the truth of Mac Allister's words. She understood the gravity of the situation. But why Lily? I stammered, my mind grasping for alternatives. Surely there's someone else, someone who's willing to sacrifice themselves. Mac Allister shook his head. It must be Lily. She possesses a unique connection to the Nexus, a power that cannot be replicated. Her sacrifice is the only way to ensure the gateway remains sealed. He turned to Lily, his eyes filled with compassion. My dear child, you possess a power that transcends comprehension. You have the ability to save the world, but it will require the ultimate sacrifice. Lily looked at Mac Allister, her face pale but resolute. She seemed to understand on a level that surpassed her years the significance of her role. What will happen to me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mac Allister hesitated, his gaze flickering with pain. You will cease to exist in this reality, he said. Your essence will be absorbed, becoming a part of the barrier that seals the gateway. You will become a guardian, a protector, a shield against the darkness. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Lily, at her innocent face, her unwavering courage, and my heart broke. She was being asked to give up everything, to sacrifice her life for the sake of a world that she barely knew. I couldn't let her do it. I wouldn't let her do it. No, I said, my voice rising with defiance. I won't allow it. There has to be another way. We'll find it. I promise you, Lily. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. I turned to Clara, pleading with her to support me, to help me find an alternative. But her face was set, her eyes filled with a grim resolve. Elias, she said, her voice gentle but firm, we have to do this. It's the only way to save the world. But what about Lily? I asked, my voice cracking with despair. Doesn't she deserve a chance to live? Doesn't she deserve a future? She will live on in a way, Clara said. Her sacrifice will not be in vain. Her memory will endure, and her spirit will protect us all. I stared at Clara, my mind reeling, my heart breaking. I couldn't accept it. I wouldn't accept it. I turned to Lily, reaching out to her, wanting to protect her, to shield her from the darkness. But Lily stopped me, placing her small hand in mine. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a calm serenity that belied her young age. It's okay, Elias, she said, her voice gentle and reassuring. I understand. I know what I have to do. A wave of despair washed over me. I had failed her. I had promised to protect her, to save her, but I had failed. The decision had been made. The sacrifice was inevitable, and I was powerless to stop it. Chapter 25, Dawn of the Final Act. Acceptance, I discovered, was a process, not an event. It wasn't a switch that flipped, banishing the despair and replacing it with resolve. It was a slow, agonizing descent, a gradual surrendering to the inevitable. The pain remained, a dull ache in the pit of my stomach, but it was tempered by a grim determination to ensure that Lily's sacrifice was not in vain. Mac Allister, sensing my internal struggle, laid a comforting hand on my shoulder. "The path ahead will be fraught with peril," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "But we must remain steadfast. We must prepare Lily for her final task." The following days were a blur of intense preparation. Mac Allister guided Lily through ancient rituals, imbuing her with knowledge and power, bolstering her connection to the Nexus. He taught her to control her abilities, to focus her energy, to embrace her destiny. Clara, her grief transformed into fierce protectiveness, tended to Lily's physical needs, ensuring that she was comfortable and well rested. She read her stories, sang her songs, and reminded her of the beauty and wonder that existed in the world, the beauty that she was about to leave behind. I struggled to find my place. Guilt gnawed at me, poisoning my thoughts, reminding me of my past failures. I felt unworthy, inadequate, incapable of fulfilling my role as a protector. But I forced myself to be strong, to be supportive, to be the shield that Lily needed. I helped Mac Allister prepare the ritual chamber, ensuring that every detail was perfect, that every element was aligned. The ritual chamber was located deep within the bowels of the mansion, a hidden sanctuary that had been used for centuries by Mac Allister's ancestors. It was a circular room, its walls lined with ancient stones, its floor covered in intricate symbols. The air was thick with the scent of incense and ozone, a palpable energy that made my skin crawl. In the center of the room, a raised platform stood, bathed in the ethereal glow of candlelight. It was here, on this platform, that Lily would make her sacrifice. As the days passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, their taunts more piercing. They knew what was coming, and they were determined to break us, to tear us apart. But we held firm, united in our resolve, bound together by our love for Lily. On the eve of the ritual, Mac Allister summoned us to his study. He looked grave, his eyes filled with concern. "Blackwood is close," he said, his voice barely audible. "They know what we're planning. They're coming to stop us." "How much time do we have?" Clara asked, her voice strained. "A few hours at most," Mac Allister said. "We must begin the ritual at dawn. There is a window of opportunity, a moment when the energies are aligned. If we miss it, we may never have another chance." "Then we need to be ready," I said, my voice firm. We spent the night in the ritual chamber, preparing for the dawn. Lily sat on the platform, her face serene, her eyes filled with a quiet acceptance. I knelt beside her, taking her hand. "I'm so proud of you, Lily," I said, my voice trembling. "You're the bravest person I know." She squeezed my hand, her eyes meeting mine. "It's okay, Elias," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm not afraid." Clara stood guard at the entrance to the chamber, her face etched with determination. She was ready to fight, to protect Lily, to defend us from the darkness. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the gloom, Mac Allister began to chant, his voice filling the chamber with ancient words, invoking forgotten powers. The air grew thick with energy, the candles flickering wildly. The symbols on the floor seemed to writhe and shift, the walls pulsating with an unseen force. Lily closed her eyes, her face serene, her body still. She was channeling the energy, preparing herself for the sacrifice. The whispers intensified, swirling around us, trying to disrupt the ritual. But Mac Allister's chanting grew stronger, drowning out the voices of the darkness. I felt a surge of power, a wave of energy that washed over me, cleansing me of my guilt, filling me with resolve. I was ready to face whatever came next. Then the door to the ritual chamber burst open. The enforcers, led by a figure I recognized all too well, stormed into the room. It was the director. He was battered, bruised, but his eyes burned with an unholy light. He had survived the lighthouse. He had come to claim Lily. "It's over," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Your efforts are futile. Lily belongs to us." The enforcers advanced, their weapons trained on us. Clara sprang into action, unleashing a blast of energy that struck one of the enforcers head-on. The enforcer staggered, his body convulsing. I moved quickly, protecting Lily. She remained serene, unmoved by the chaos, her focus unwavering. Mac Allister continued to chant, his voice growing stronger, his power intensifying. The ritual was reaching its climax. The director lunged forward, his eyes fixed on Lily. He had to stop the ritual before it was too late. I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You're not going to get her," I said, my voice firm. The director snarled, his face contorted with rage. He struck me with his fist, sending me sprawling to the ground. He stepped over me, advancing towards Lily. Clara attacked, firing energy bolts at the director, but he deflected them with ease, his power too great. He reached the platform, his hand outstretched, reaching for Lily. Just as his fingers brushed her skin, Lily opened her eyes. A surge of power erupted from her, a wave of pure, unadulterated energy that engulfed the director. He screamed, his body contorting, his face melting. He was being consumed by the nexus, his very essence erased. The enforcers collapsed, their bodies lifeless. The ritual chamber was silent once more. The director was gone. The threat of Blackwood, it seemed, was over. Or was it? Lily looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and peace. "It's time," she said, her voice gentle. I nodded, my heart breaking. The ritual had reached its conclusion. The moment of sacrifice had arrived. Lily closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. And then she faded away. Her body dissolved into light, her essence absorbed into the barrier that sealed the gateway. She was gone. But her memory, her courage, her sacrifice would live on forever. We had stopped Blackwood, but at a cost that I would never forget. The darkness had been pushed back, but it would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its opportunity to return. And it was up to us, the survivors, to remain vigilant, to protect the world from the horrors that lay beyond. The fight was far from over. Epilogue: Guardians of the Veil. Years have passed since the events at McAllister Estate. The world has moved on, blissfully unaware of the horrors that were averted, the sacrifice that was made. But for Clara and me, the memory of Lily remains a constant presence, a guiding light in the darkness. We have dedicated our lives to honoring her legacy, to protecting the world from the forces that seek to corrupt it. We have become hunters, seekers, guardians against the encroaching night. We travel the globe, investigating strange occurrences, tracking down rumors of Blackwood activity, seeking out others who share our knowledge and our commitment. We have formed a network, a clandestine organization dedicated to fighting the darkness, to preserving the balance between worlds. Armitage, his health failing but his mind sharp as ever, provides us with invaluable guidance, interpreting ancient texts, deciphering cryptic clues, and offering us his wisdom and experience. We have encountered other survivors, individuals who have been touched by the darkness, who have emerged from the abyss with their humanity intact. They have joined our cause, lending their skills and their courage to the fight. We have faced countless challenges, battled terrifying creatures, and thwarted numerous attempts by Blackwood remnants to unleash their twisted agendas. The threat, though diminished, is never truly gone. The whispers persist, the darkness lingers, and the entities beyond the veil continue to hunger for our world. I often think about Lily, about the life she was denied, the future she sacrificed. I wonder what she would have become, what joys she would have experienced, what dreams she would have fulfilled. But then I remember her courage, her serenity, her unwavering commitment to the greater good. And I know that she made the right choice. She saved us all. I also think about the darkness within myself, the lingering influence of Blackwood, the temptation to embrace the power, to succumb to the whispers. It is a constant struggle to keep that darkness at bay, to maintain my humanity. But I have learned to control it, to harness it, to use it as a weapon against the forces of evil. I have learned to turn the darkness into light. Clara, my steadfast companion, my trusted ally, remains my anchor, my source of strength. Her unwavering belief in humanity, her boundless compassion, inspire me to continue the fight, to never give up hope. We have grown old, our bodies weary, but our spirits remain strong. We have seen too much, endured too much to simply fade away. We know that the fight will continue long after we are gone. But we have planted the seeds of hope. We have trained a new generation of warriors, and we have left a legacy that will endure. One day, perhaps, the darkness will be banished, the whispers silenced, and the world will be safe from the horrors that lie beyond. But until that day comes, we will continue to fight. We will continue to protect. We will continue to honor the memory of Lily. For she is not just a memory. She is a guardian, a protector, a shield against the darkness. She is the hope of the future. And as long as we remember her, as long as we continue to fight, the darkness will never prevail. The darkness will never win. The end.